Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Diagnosis Demo brought to you by MarTech Therapy. I'm your host, Matthew Niederberger, and today I'm thrilled to have Matthias Bettag with me as we dive into the world of Odoscope. Together, we'll explore how this innovative platform empowers companies to personalize experience for anonymous visitors from the very first touchpoint, all without the need for cookies. Yeah, you heard that right. No cookies required. Before we get into the details, let's take a moment to reflect on the journey Matthias and I have shared. Back in the day when web analytics was still finding its footing and we were both part of the Web Analytics Association, which later became the Digital Analytics Association, we were pushing boundaries, learning from one another, and helping shape the future of data-driven insights. It's amazing how paths that once crossed can come full circle, bringing us back together to explore groundbreaking innovations like this. For some context, Odoscope hails from Germany, just like Matthias does, a country well known for its strict privacy laws. Now, this German innovation is leading charge in doing more with less when it comes to customer data. Or should we call it customer yet? Because they're still anonymous, but that's a discussion we should have. But it's incredibly inspiring to see how German ingenuity is driving a new approach to personalization, one that's both privacy first and highly effective. So whether you're a marketer, a data enthusiast, or just curious about how digital experiences are evolving, listen, you're going to be in for a treat. Now let's dive into Odoscope and see how it's reshaping personalization. Hey, Matthias, good to see you again. I know before this recording, we actually just saw each other once where you gave me a great demo of Odoscope, which we're kind of repeating here today. But before then, we hadn't spoken to each other, and I think it was around 10 years. But that was back in the days of the Digital Analytics Association, which I just explained. That's kind of where our paths crossed. And now with Odoscope, our paths are crossing again, and not necessarily from a how should I say it, from this recording perspective, but also out of personal interest, because personalization is driving a lot of business in the industry right now. But you've got something amazing to show, actually being able to personalize for anonymous users. So welcome to the show, and I'm really excited about this.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you for having me. And indeed, it's fun how the world is small and paths cross again after a couple of years where we just follow each other on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely.
We see us. Yeah.
So last time, like I said, I've kind of already had a sneak peek at Odoscope, but can you before we start diving into the actual demonstration, what can you tell me about Odoscope? What drove Odoscope to develop itself and focus on anonymous users?
Yeah. So Odoscope is a tool which can activate data in real time. Or let me phrase it that way. That means that it takes the current session data, what's kind of in the air now. We have a time of the day, we have a day of the week, we may have a referrer, we have a display type or device type, and all kind of other properties. And these data points are used immediately to analyze them versus the data history, usually we're in e-commerce, of that shop, and identifies lookalike audiences. And this lookalike audience is used to predict the behavior or to identify the most relevant product to display. For instance, you have like hundreds and hundreds of products in one category. Yeah. How to sort them? Or what are the top 3 products for a record where you don't want to sell bestsellers all the way because everybody is different. So bestseller sorting, as we know, it's not matching the
requirements of the user
all the time. Exactly.
Yeah. So when we say anonymous user, I think it's good to kind of paint the picture here. They are in the sense, so anonymous would be non-PII in this case, but also not any previous behavioral data.
Yeah, because you're right. I actually distinct between what I call gray traffic and dark traffic. So let's start with gray traffic. A classic, meanwhile, by missing, if users don't grant consent, then these tools, which haven't been granted to track and run, cannot operationalize this user. And that applies for pretty much all, or at least the vast majority of personalization engines or UX optimization or even so-called smart searches and whatnot. They always come with some kind of cookie to re-identify that user. It must not even be PII at that moment, but at least the customer journey of a returning user. But the whole operationalization happens by re-identifying a user who was there before, which means in the first visit, that user gets just a cookie. Here you are, we start tracking what you're doing. If you come back, we know what you wanted. Well, but that implies first that the intention of the user who is returning is the same as the visit before. Okay, that's a fair guess, but certainly not always the case. Second, it means that the user is first giving consent and then not deleting cookies / switching devices. So, long story short, a lot of traffic, meanwhile, due to these reasons, is what I call gray traffic, means you track that traffic, but you can't operationalize it because of missing consent or just a first visit. And also a first visit can repeat a first visit, because if people delete cookies afterwards, every visit will be tracked as a first visit, which is totally misleading analytics. Anyway, we know that. The second part that's even worse is dark traffic. That is if your base tracker requires consent, like Google Analytics does if you do it legally in Europe. And if that consent is not granted, and you don't have a fallback like a pure session tracking, which you can do so, or any other, then you have nothing. You don't even know who's on your website unless somebody is purchasing and then you see him by the checkout, but not by the behavior before. And that dark traffic is not even visible. Data is still there. I mean, these users are on the website. They're interacting with the website. They have clicks. They have a time of the day. They have a day of the week. They have a device type. Even if these data points are just kind of fluid in the air, they can be used to identify stuff on an anonymous base. In that case, it's really anonymous, and identify what's the most likely preference of this kind of user coming with these kind of data points.
So you mentioned, you mentioned Google Analytics there, saying if it's implemented legally. Has Odoscope kind of evolved from the restrictions laid down by GDPR since we're European-based?
No, actually, that was a side effect. So Odoscope, in the very first place, was an agency. Okay. It still had the same name. It switched completely business. Odoscope, as it is now, is going to be 10 years anniversary this summer. Right? That is like the customer engagement
talking about
platform.
Anniversary. It's also your birthday today, isn't it?
It is. Thank you.
Happy birthday. I just got the message on LinkedIn. I was like, I needed something to remind me. But thank you for mentioning yourself with the word anniversary.
You even invited me to your show on my birthday. What an honor. Thank you.
Exactly. Did you get the cake I sent you? No, just kidding.
Exactly. So it started as an agency. And in the very first place, there was some customer walking by and saying, can you do me some user tracking software for a lab, like eye tracking, mouse, keyboard, stuff like that. In the old days, in the 2000s, a lot of usability tests were done in a lab. You invite 30 people, you give them a task, and then, we know that was the time before it became proper web analytics, but that was the first thing. And when Odoscope did this service, it was already the core of identifying. So it was basically a web analytics tool, right? But the web analytics tool had to evolve to become something more. And because it was very, very good in path analysis, but path analysis is a huge task for computing. Uh-huh. So that kind of challenge was, we have a path analysis even before other tools had path analysis to figure this thing out. But that needs a certain database setting, which led to a real-time cluster. And a real-time cluster needs to go software as a service, otherwise it's limited by your very local computer. And so step by step, Odoscope became a cloud service in a private cloud in Germany. So it's not on, it actually needs to be a super fast cloud as well, on a private cloud server. And it's a real-time cluster. And the decision engine was what was making the tool different, because just another web analytics tool in the very early days wasn't something which would gain any market share. It's just another. But the idea was to have a tool which can analyze the data and make a decision out of it, a real-time data activation. The dream of us web analysts in the early days, remember when we had like the 4 phases of analytics, like up to predictive and even prescriptive analytics. Yeah. And actually, when I think back 15, 20 years ago, I'm not sure if I knew really what was prescriptive analytics, how does that work? Because we were not thinking of a tool doing the decision right away. We're thinking of doing analytics to understand what happened until yesterday and to come up with a better plan up from tomorrow, so to speak.
I was reading about that in the book, Customer 360. We're talking about reactive and proactive. And
exactly.
We're coming to an age where proactive analytics is occurring, where the insights are being generated automatically and action is being taken potentially through agentic AI in the future with these downstream solutions that'll be able to start a campaign or stop a campaign if the results are bad, et cetera, or change certain configuration. So it's definitely very interesting.
So this is how it evolved. And meanwhile, it's a full-blown real-time data activation, which comes with identifying user behavior by just analyzing very fastly versus the data history of sometimes it's a few weeks, sometimes it's a whole year. Depends. And that's another, so to speak, superpower. It can align the user preferences with merchandising. Means what the shop has for goals, for business goals, what the shop wants to sell, maybe optimize on margin, maybe getting rid of the last stocks, maybe making sure that any kind of stock, and it can be offline, online mix, if you have stores and online shop, is available by which region, a better click and collect, better delivery, how to serve different, what we call audiences. When we see a certain type of users, say users from bigger cities in the evening, purchase significantly different products than, let's say, people from the rural area at the same time.
Well, you're getting us all excited here, Matthias.
And that's what we're going to see in a minute. And that's quite interesting because this is purely data-driven, but we're able to inject kind of certain ways to also optimize it, not only by purely data-driven, but also by business goals.
I say, let's not wait any longer. Let's take a look at this.
All right, let's go. So what you see here is the category female pullover in a fashion shop. That is the controller, means this is how it's displayed for, say, the shop manager, the category manager.
And how are these products getting into the platform?
A product feed. We get like a product feed. This is how the shop looks, right? You see pullover, female, and blah, blah. So we get like daily, hourly, 10-minutely updates of the product feeds. So we have the whole assortment literally in memory, right? With all the data points which come by the product feeds. And so what you see here is, as I said, this is how the proper shop looks like.
Yeah, we can't see that tab, sorry.
You can't see that tab?
No, just the controller.
So I have to, anyway, if you click on that and I say show, then it switches into the proper shop where you have the look and feel of the shop.
Oh, okay.
What you see here is a few meta informations, like 100% means availability by sizes. So it's available in all sizes. New is the label. It's not long in the shop. So it's here 12 days since it's first in the shop. Other products are like here, a long time runner.
Couple of years
then you
already.
Have product number, description, price, and so on. And this is just the top 20. It could be 50, right? So, and that would be like a classic desktop display. In the category female pullover, you have hundreds of pullover, which are the first 50 to display, right? And what we would see here is, or what we see here are what we call audiences. So the default audience, that's the users which I consider to be gray traffic or even dark traffic, means we have no cookie, we have no login, we have no customer data, we have only a few data points here. So let's go from a Berlin metropolitan area with an iPhone on a Wednesday morning. That would be the ranking.
That's a great level of granularity
for
there,
a user.
all the way to the day of the week.
Exactly. So we can do that, and there are different data points available. This is around that one. So that would be the top 50 pullover list for a user from Berlin with an iPhone on a Wednesday morning.
Now, just to get a sense, since we can't see the shopping tab immediately, what do we do with this information? We're seeing a product list here of 50 different products.
Mm-hmm.
What is the purpose of Odoscope in relation to the web shop?
It should show the most relevant products on top for every single user and on every single click.
So it's going to supply a feed of products that you can integrate into your web shop.
Actually, we have the whole product feed available. I mean, sent to Odoscope.
Yeah. And that's
And then
into Odoscope?
Yeah, exactly. And from there, if a user goes to the category female pullover, this is displayed individually by user. And of course, if a user clicks on a certain filter, this filter will be respected, say only red pullovers or something,
Okay.
but it still be sorted. So the thing is that there are different users looking at these category pages with different data points. So let's say we change the location. And we
How would
don't
you?
go.
What's
Go ahead.
the technical integration of this into the web store?
Okay. That is basically it's an API call to Odoscope. In that moment, the page is rendering,
Yeah,
and
in the
Odoscope
life
is
cycle.
sending
Yeah.
back basically an array of SKUs or product IDs, which are rendered in that very order.
Okay.
Right. So that's how the magic works. It's the shop calls Odoscope, and within 20 milliseconds, Odoscope comes back with the order by individual relevance based on the lookalike audience. That's really fast computing, right?
I can't
And
even
that can
blink
go.
that fast.
We did that test with maybe some people heard about the 1 billion cap ride benchmark. You can look it up. It's a benchmark for real-time clusters. We performed super well on that one. It's not in the benchmark list, but I can show you. So that scale, this is what I want to say. We just have to put more servers, but it's commodity hardware. It's not special, right?
Okay.
But let's go back to that use case. So we had that user from Berlin, and because of the data history, the lookalike audience tells us that this product is more likely to be relevant than this one, and so on. It goes sorting. Let's change from, say, Berlin to Bavaria. Metropolitan area in Bavaria could be Munich, still with an iPhone, and now I have something wrong here. What did I do? That's a problem. I have to check back. So what we see here is a user from Berlin metropolitan area iPhone on a Wednesday morning. And that's the top 50 list based on the lookalike audience identified by Odoscope with the highest relevance sorted. If the user comes from Munich, Bavaria, metropolitan area could be Munich, with the same device and at the same time, but users in Munich or in that area have shown a different purchase behavior, which means other products are more relevant for them. As you see, the first product hasn't changed, but the order has changed a lot.
Yeah.
So let's see what would happen if we still stay in Bavaria, but now we're switching from iPhone to Windows Firefox. And if data history has shown different, here we go. We have another order. And if different products are sold between, say, here Wednesday and Saturday, then also you see the top 5, 6 haven't changed a lot, but behind that. So let's go to North Rhine-Westphalia, maybe Cologne, Düsseldorf.
I still remember a
I
day
think
where
you
this
get
was
the
done.
point,
Yeah,
right? This
no,
is
exactly. I was just thinking.
What I'm simulating here are different sessions, of course, right?
Yeah.
Because if I change these data points, it's another user. That wouldn't happen in the same session, of course. If you click back and forth, you wouldn't see another list based on the same filter setting. That would be confusing, of course.
Yeah, and I was just remembering a day when this would be done manually. You would look into the data, and you would see, hey, what are the top performing products?
Exactly.
You would update the your bestseller list, or your maybe you would have like a top 3 that you could manually edit, and you would be changing the settings there. This is quite impressive, especially with the speed, and more importantly, that it's there's no cookie being placed. It's all being done on the data points that are mentioned here above.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. And
having said that, the question arises on the left-hand side. I see 3 different.
Yes, that's what we call audiences.
Okay.
Yeah. And we can set up different audiences. We call it audiences, but not segments, because usually, indirectly, you said it already, a segment is based on quite a few definitions. It's usually not a loose thing, right? So you have customer segments. You have maybe customer journey phase, like AIDA or whatever, from exploration to decision.
Yeah.
Different sub-segments. You have to set up that segment, you have to define them, you have to maintain these definitions, and you will have rules per segment what to do. So he comes back the third time, still haven't purchased, maybe give him 5% off or something like that.
Yeah.
all these rules have to be maintained over time. We have clients which had like multiple FTEs only working on comparing weekly business scores based on whatever they did more or less manually, in combination with campaigns, with gut feeling, and on all the different rules for all the different segments.
And updating everything manually.
It's an infinite workload which is piling up over time. Clearly something which could be done much smarter.
But having said that, I mean, what kind of process takes place in the back end to determine the algorithm, or to determine the order in which these products are shown? This is not something that can be done by just a week or two worth of data.
These are too many permutations, right?
Yeah. How does it work to get a relatively accurate order of products based on the data points that you have?
Yeah. So Odoscope gets on a daily level or even hourly level at least the web analytics data, which is all the click behavior in the shop, and the coding product data, category and product data. So what Odoscope knows, at least by these two data sources, we can add more data sources like customer data, weather, whatnot. But what Odoscope knows already by these two data sources, web tracking and product, is all the properties of a user coming to a web shop and how these properties correlate with the purchase behavior. Here we see product views. Let's go for product order.
Just to reiterate, you're not doing this with a cookie. You're basing this on each page that is loaded, collecting that information.
That is for the entire shop, actually. So Odoscope knows across the entire shop. That's like a fingerprint of per shop. Even if we would look at a different shop selling the same assortment, very likely it will have a different outcome because they do different marketing. They may have a slightly different target audience. So what we see here is how strong does a certain property, here referrer, correlate with the purchase behavior. Means people with different referrers, if that is a high impact, buy significantly different products. That's important to know. If we click into the referrers, we see different referrers who make a different stake of the total referrer. And then we see a different correlation towards here product orders, right? And that is done with all properties and sub-properties, right? And it has nothing to do with cookies. It's just plain raw data.
But the question I have is, how do you make this correlation? This is all from the data warehouse, right? There's nothing being tracked on the website.
It happens in our data lake, actually. It's a ClickHouse-based data lake, and the decision engine sits in memory. That's even faster, right? And these correlations are done with every data upload. So, for instance, we see here different browsers, and we see the majority comes with Chrome, then comes Safari, but actually the Firefox users, which are a smaller chunk, have a bigger impact. So Firefox users are buying even more significantly different products than other users from other browsers, right? But it's not only on one data point. This is just one property per each. But as you see in the demo, it may be different things coming together.
Yeah.
So, and that could even, one can rule something else out. So you ask about the audiences here. So only here we have only 3 audiences. Default is for all the users we don't know anything about. I showed it. Then we have the known user. Known user is nice because let's assume we have a cookie recognition. Yay, right? And we know some customer journey or user data here. So this user has, by any reason, indicated his age. Age group 45 to 49. That's a strong data point in fashion, of course, right?
Great age group, by the way. Absolutely. One of the best age groups to be in at the moment.
Yeah. I actually just left it, but it was a good age group. I agree. So now we're here in the audience known user. Maybe that has a different strategy. How that is done, I'll show you. That means like you know different things about known users, so you can apply different algorithms.
From a practical perspective, how is this recognized within Odoscope? Is this data being pushed into Odoscope again from within the data lake, or is it how
The
can
data
I?
lake is kind of our data collector. We get all the client data sources into the data lake, and from
Okay.
the data lake, it goes in the real-time memory, in the real-time cluster to
So you would push the
to be
user
activated.
profiles with the necessary parameters per user into the data lake.
Yeah, but it happens in real time, so it's not something which is pre-cached or something. I mean, we could do that, but usually it's a real dynamic analysis in the moment the click happens or the page is rendering,
Interesting.
and then it
That's a lot of power.
it's a lot of power, and that's one of our unique selling points is really having these super fast database engine which
Well,
allows to do this
but it's
immediately.
interesting to see that you are. So the initial premise of, for reaching out to you for Odoscope was that anonymous user. But it's interesting to see that you can go one step
We can go
beyond
further, right? But
with
exactly, and because the methodology is different, it takes a bit. If someone is used to think as I did for 15 years before I met Odoscope, if you think in segments, and segments need recognition and definition, and they need rules for data activation, then it's actually difficult to think from a very dynamic perspective. So
Yeah.
we could say also, because this is an AI-driven system, it works differently. Instead of saying a step-by-step computing, I place a cookie, I wait for the user to return. When he returns, I apply a certain rule based on you like that yellow socks last week or whatever. That is step by step. Everybody has in mind, I want to do optimization with that. I want to get a customer purchasing by that. Here, it's different. Here we say to the engine, optimize sales by margin. Bang. And how that happens, the engine will decide. All the permutations, all the different variations, all driven to the goal, in that case, optimize on margin, will be done by the machine. And that allows to get rid of all that step by step, often with a lot of gut feeling or insecurities or too static or too broad. What's called personalization is often, let's say, different pre-cached orders for different segments, but a segment is not an individual. And a segment always comes with compromises because whatever the reason, I'm in segment S23, right? So that is all getting rid. We talk about that like basically like a salesperson would do in a shop. You enter a fashion shop, and that person looks at you and say, "Well, you look like a 45 to 49-year-old. I can show you these pullovers which will look for you, and I see your size and your habit." So immediately things happen, right?
Yeah.
And so coming back to that example, if we have the age group and we're known to known user, and let's say what happens if we switch the device.
Is that based on your experience that device is the biggest differentiator?
Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It's really the data tells us, and what you saw now was nothing, right?
Nothing. It is.
Nothing happened.
Well, not for the
Why
45,
is that?
49-year-olds, yeah.
Age group is so much more important for selling fashion than what kind of phone do you have in your pocket.
Yeah.
Right? But still, it's possible that let's go to wherever we go. Let's go to Hamburg.
There's a difference.
This age group behaves different for this shop in Germany by region. Hamburgers by different than Bavarians and by Berliners and so on. But the device in this particular analysis doesn't play a role anymore. Right? It's quite interesting.
You mentioned also being able to focus or operate by margin.
Yes.
So what I'm seeing here is what you've shown so far is pretty much just the order of the products based on a set collection of data points. But when you're talking about operating on margin, you'll need a lot more data and nothing that can be collected from the user. How do you configure Odoscope to also take into account any of your business objectives, like lowering specific stocks or focusing on stocks that are almost sold out, or and one more, for example, that I did see earlier is the colors. I mean, there's a lot of configuration that can still happen.
Yeah.
That the machine learning, the AI, cannot focus on without knowing the business context.
Exactly. You're totally right. Right. And if we would just let it run only by user preferences, things could happen, which sometimes happen. Also, it's a known nightmare for conversion rate optimizers. The conversion rate goes up, but people buy products with low profit. Yeah. And that means that the whole campaign is possibly more expensive to increase the conversion rate, because the thinking was, if we have increased the conversion rate, we also increase our revenue or profit. But that must not necessarily be the case. And that's exactly, that's a problem. So we have here a strategies tab, and the strategies, they rely on the product feed. This is a very relatively small product feed. It could be a kilometer longer, right? But as you've seen, we could, here is, for instance, low availability. So I could do a penalty or strong penalty on products on low availability. So they will just appear further down the list. Yeah. Everything is sorting. It's not hiding. Means if you scroll further, if you click further, you will see everything else, right? It's just putting things which matter on top. So,
and does this go for the entire collection then, or can you focus?
Depends.
This on,
it can go,
okay.
And now it becomes complex, but it's actually very flexible. We can do these strategies for only a certain category. If we, for instance, see like this kind of behavior happens in shoes, but not in I don't know, shirts, right? Or it could also be applied to only an audience. Let's say Apple users, big cities, get this algorithm. Yeah. They are optimized on margin and get the latest new products up, while somebody who comes from Google Shopping is more likely to see the sales products and the remainers or whatever, right? So there might be different audiences, as we call it, and or categories, even virtual categories. Yeah. We could say this kind of rule applies to all blue products, no matter if it's a shoe or a hat or a shirt or a trouser. And of course, we can boost negatively, positively by any product feed detail. So now I go for red, and let's say I put red. I just come up with a, and let's make it a bit only the top 20 so you can see the details here, right? So now I put that off, which probably will add me even more red, right? And maybe I want to go for price. Unfortunately, we don't have margin here, but let's assume price is margin. Mm-hmm. And now we have a strategy.
That's just a matter of the setup that we're looking at.
Exactly.
Margin can be added as a value.
We can add everything in the product feed. It really depends on what's in there, but every data point and product feed and combinations of it can be used to create a strategy, which here, I mean, red and high price pullovers. However, it's not a descending order. You see here, number 2, 3, and 4 are quite expensive. Down here is another more expensive one. And that will still be sorted individually. So Berlin iPad users will see that. Berlin Android 13 users, same rule set, but different order.
Looks like Android users are spending more money.
Or interestingly
inclined
to
use spending more money.
It could be. And let's see how Cologne people are dealing here. So you see, even that, which is kind of forced to focus on high price red, is resorted by the according data points for a user. And so we cannot really say how many variations are out there. But we measure the impact of individual sorting versus bestseller sorting.
So you mentioned it does get a little bit more complex when you start focusing on specific product groups, or I think you would call them different strategies.
Yes,
but I think for a lot of companies that would be the one of the major plus points.
Yes, it is because it's super smart and easy to. I show you like.
Because I mean, you can do a strategy over your entire shop, but also bring it down on categories and subcategory levels.
And that's exactly how it works. You start broad. You don't start with 16 variables and 14 different audiences and strategies. You start small, right? But then you learn by the week. And the more you learn and the more data you have, it's easier for a shop with more data to complete their exercises because they have significant output earlier than a shop with, say, only 1,000 visits a day or something. But still, it works in both ways. But you start with broader strategies and scenarios, and then you get more and more accurate.
And
But
since this is an
Mhm.
API call, it's also going to be it can be used on any type of system.
Absolutely. We're completely independent from what kind of web tracking. It can be Google, Adobe, Matomo, Piwik, Twipler,
No, I mean in the
it.
sense of being able to push this into a web app, for instance,
Also,
or
yeah.
sorry, a mobile app.
Yeah. We have an integration. It could go with a mobile app. I come with a desktop. Of course, it's everything I show here is even getting more significant and relevant for smaller devices.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that looking up 20 pullovers like I show here, I mean, you take 1 second per eye to identify this one, even it's for last. On a mobile phone, I'm not sure if I would scroll down to number 19. Then the first 5 are even more important. And we sometimes see, not only sometimes, we often see uplifts of, I mean, we're safe to say 10% uplift with Odoscope sorting is nothing which surprises us in revenue. 10% out of nowhere. On mobile, 20% is not surprising us because it's just more significant what you see on mobile on the first 5, 6, 7, maybe.
So talking about as I have said quite often in some of my videos, is that you always need a use case to before you start investing into MarTech solutions for your company, because the use case needs to be built around increasing or revenue or making your company more cost effective. How does that work with Odoscope? I know it's with everything being real time, probably maybe that you guys are in another category with the amount of power that you have in your systems. But regardless of the pricing, how do you justify the investment with Odoscope? I mean, it does need to drive, you need to have the data to back up the investment.
So it's actually quite easy because what we do is we measure the success with the client's data. So we take the product, the web analytics data, whatever they have. Let's say they have Matomo running, right? So we import that day by day. This is our dashboard, but it's 100%. It's their data. It's a client's data. We are not a tracker. We're not a pixel, right? Odoscope is only
you
using
leverage
the
other
data.
platforms' data. Yeah,
exactly. We're an intelligent data layer across the data sources, so to speak, with a decision engine in real time. Another way to define it. But what you see here is two different, it's an A/B test, right? Odoscope is serving all its sortings versus a control group because we need to prove that whatever Odoscope does has a positive impact and we're doing so.
And it continually does that A/B testing.
It's an ongoing A/B testing. That's another thing I love about it because we always we both very well remember the time when kind of continuous optimization, looping ongoingly with testing and so on, and that's kind of that's already in the tool. So the tool is used with, you can do A, B, C, D, E, but let's keep it simple. It's variant A is, let's say, all the users who have seen Odoscope sorting on a category page. Variant B are all the users who have seen whatever, bestseller sorting, rule-based sorting, any other sorting. So we have these two groups. And then they perform. You see different KPIs here, and the most important usually is product order. And you see 1.6% conversion rate on A and 1.42 conversion rate on group B, which makes almost 17% more on group A. And if the background is green, that means this is a statistical significant data. If it's only a red number or green number, then it's still a trend. So what we see here is the same than we see here in the graph. You see the conversion rates by day. I even can say, let's just look at that, and you immediately get the results. And here by eye, you can see blue is winning over gray. A versus B. That's
Google
simple.
hasn't called you guys yet to redo their user interface for Google Analytics 4?
Not yet.
Sorry.
I'm not sure if I take that job.
This is the dashboard looks pretty sweet.
I love it. I love it. That's actually, and that's one of the core things which makes it easy to work with, because without a good dashboard, you're back to console thinking and so on.
Well, it makes the whole proving of the business case a whole lot easier. And then, like personally, I work a lot with customer data platforms, and what I always say is that the impact of CDPs is very indirect on the profit and loss.
Interesting.
So
yeah.
How do you prove the case? And I think that's one of the bigger challenges is being able to prove that case financially on the positive influence that a CDP can have, or at least one of the modules within it. But you guys built that into your platform, which
I love the flexibility. You need to know that the dashboard is also on the real-time cluster. That's just how it's so super fast, with the very same data bit by bit as in the proper web analytics system. So back to that chart, just to show you how we see it. We have an aggregation button, which gives you all the aggregate. That's nice. You see blue is flying higher than gray. But what's interesting or important is the confidence interval. And if you see like the bandwidth here distinct from that bandwidth, means you have a white gap. That is the same as a green background, means the data is significant. And if you have that kind of test result, actually from here on, you could say, I switch from 50-50 to 90-10, right? Why should we leave money on the table?
Exactly.
So, and then you run with the next one. Let's say we just have Safaris running, and it's about whatever certain campaign. What do we have here? And maybe we want to see only those who came to Germany. So now we build a little segment here. And by eyesight, it's not more that easy to understand who is winning. Here, only one KPI is statistically significant. And aggregation will, they just meet each other.
Yeah.
Confidence interval, bang.
It's all over the place.
This is not a winning test, right?
No.
So either data is missing to find out. I mean, we're down here to only 2.3% of all users by the segment are wildly made up here. But this is how you can analyze it, right? I can counter that. I can say, let's go to a different campaign, and then I see this. So, and you saw how fast it is, right? And just to show you one more.
Yes. Is the next step going to be that it's going to, so you have your default groups within the control screen, but will it sometimes, is the next step for Odoscope that it will proactively suggest specific audiences for you to focus on?
That's a good question. It's the audiences now have to be set up, even though it's a single data point audience. So if we say, for instance, newsletter, the recognition came by newsletter. It's very simple. So let's say, just to show you how it is, and I will answer your question coming from that. I hope it makes it easier. So now we have users coming from the internal newsletter. Yay. That's a very loyal audience, though it's a smaller audience, of course, right? We don't have millions and millions here. So it implies they're interested, they're returning buyers. And also the newsletter is sent out with a certain campaign. So here we have the strategy to show pullovers, in that case, we're in the pullover section, with the boost on linen fabrics. That's the current campaign. It will still be sorted. And let's see what happens now if I switch the location.
So this is like an additional business objective that initial audience needs to take into account, needs to deal with.
But if the business decision is that they want to show the campaign products on the category page, if somebody comes from newsletter, then the identification is just like shop.com/pullover $newsletter, something like that, a parameter. And then if we simulate it here, they see different products. So I just switch between a user, could still be an anonymous user, coming from newsletter, or someone, watch it, coming from SEA brand. Completely different products, because that's a different strategy here, boosting linen versus the default.
Yeah.
I could also, just to show you, add an alternative here. So we have two different, if I publish this is an A/B test set up and running. Half
Okay,
of the
because that was
users,
one of my questions. You had the variant A and variant B. How do you set that up? But this is how you.
this is
Okay.
how I do an A/B test. I've never seen it simpler, right? So half of the audience which come into default by having no other parameters which put them into a different audience would say the marine strategy. Half of the audience would see whatever's default. And how to set up the strategies you do by the product feed based on either categories and so on, which I showed you when we go
Or a specific,
right?
or a specific product or visitor or
Exactly.
device,
So
any kind of variable. Yeah.
I can flood the page and you see only marine pullovers, and you can do this kind of brute force. You can put whatever is the score here, right? We can set it up as you want. So pinning is just overweighting something, so it will always be on place one. So quite a few tricks and stunts can be done by that. But long story short, you can serve with very simple strategies and kind of broad audiences, all your audiences by behavior and by business goals per audience and or per category.
Matthias, I have to say this has been very impressive, and not only the control screen that you saw, that where you're able to fine tune all these different audiences and actually set up the A/B tests with relative ease. Like you said, I've never seen it been done that easy before, especially linked to your product catalog. But then, of course, we're analysts at heart. Coming back from the Digital Analytics Association, even before that, it was still called the Web Analytics Association, that there's this great analytics feature. Because, like I said, one of the more challenging issues that we're facing today is proving the value of these solutions.
Yeah.
And back when we were, you could get Google Analytics, hey, it was free. You could upgrade it to 150,000 euros a year. I don't know what, or dollars. I don't know what the costs were at some point.
Yeah.
But being able to prove the added value of these products has been a major challenge. And putting this into it, again, based on the fact that it's still cookieless, you're pulling in data from other tracking systems and tying it all together is very impressive. I just want to say a huge thank you for taking
You're
the
welcome,
time.
Matthew, and you got it, and I love to talk on that, but you hit the main points. I love it as well. I would just add it's not only cookieless, because cookieless often is understood as switching third parties to first parties. It's actually, it can work with cookies, no problem, but it's actually also working cookie free. Just to complete the whole story, the only cookie which is set is a session cookie, which doesn't have to have any consent for having variant A or variant B in the cookie. So a returning visit would be still in the same group. Yeah. But as on any other A/B test, if that cookie is deleted, then that user will be diced again into one of the two groups.
Yeah,
not a big deal.
And you've updated my perception on this being a solution just to target anonymous users.
Yes,
but that you can also still continue
we have the
working
full
on
power to
the
do
known
way
users.
more. Whatever is provided to Odoscope, we can work with customer data, and then it could be that for a known user, we'll look into the peer group within the known customers instead of the lookalike audience across all users, like for anonymous. Or we would also not, we could also look into the customer behavior, say what was the last products or the most frequent product or the product at this time of the year. So whatever tactique is requested or
almost everything except
can be done.
Almost everything except the mood the user is actually in.
And web analysts will love that, because this is a segment I just created. I can save that segment. I make just a test segment. Then I have that saved segment. I can make it a metric. I love that. Yeah. And then suddenly I erase it here. Oops, sorry. And then you remember I just had a segment, right? And now I have that segment as a metric in here. It's actually not performing better than the other. These kind of stunts, usually you need a BI tool or a data warehouse for it. I was
just about to say, I've seen, what is it called? Tableau Pulse, where you can,
Yeah.
Salesforce is really pushing that, where you can get these kind of reports
Yeah.
just by pushing a request in Slack, and it responds with this
Nice.
data within Slack. So I'm quite confident that at some point you guys will be doing this
Yeah. Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, thanks so much for having me. I'd love to talk on. Maybe there are more questions coming up, so happy to do another session.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
yes,
Maybe
excellent.
I would get a client use case in and see how it definitely performs. Matthias, thanks again. Next time we do have to have beers with this, because as analysts, our
We
throats are
have
getting
to.
dry from all this chatter. But it's been great seeing you again, and thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. It was a pleasure. Bye bye.